You are tuning into The Deal. I'm Danny Brown, and every week I interview the best real estate agents in the world and talk about seven-figure commissions, celebrity and high-profile clients, and the craziest real estate stories you could ever imagine. Enjoy this week's episode. Mark McLaughlin, good morning. Good to see you.
Good morning, Danny. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's been a bit. I think we bumped into each other maybe at the last retreat or some other big Compass function. But for those who don't know Mark, who's had a very distinguished career in brokerage, running brokerages, owning brokerages, Pacific Union before it got acquired by Compass. Now, today, you sit as interim president of Compass, president of California, but also you came back to Compass a few years ago after doing some other entrepreneurial stuff as chief strategist. So welcome, all those titles. I don't know if I covered it, but you tell me, what are you doing right now, Mark? What's your job?
Right now, I'm trying to shed a few of these titles.
Yeah, you have like 10 jobs.
No, I'm sitting in on an interim basis for Netta, who's out on family leave. She just had her second child, and so I'm just keeping her chair warm. She'll be back in the next 30 days, and then I'll focus again on just strategy for the company. So, but I'm really enjoying myself.
Yeah. So let's take it back to your beginning of your career. I'd love to hear your arc of how you got into brokerage. And, you were not an agent. Most people that started brokerages were agents and then they went on their own. You came from a business background, but why don't you go back to the beginning, where you grew up, where you went to school, and how you sort of worked your way into this crazy residential real estate business.
Yeah. Wow. That might be a nightmare, not a dream come true, right? Let's see. Where shall I start? Well, I grew up in Marin County, Northern California. I went to high school in Marin County. I went to college at Cal. I was an athlete. Go Bears. I was recruited to Cal to play soccer. I played both soccer and lacrosse at Cal.
Ooh, that's big time.
Yeah. And my first business, I opened I started a fitness center in Berkeley. And while I was still in school, and then I opened a second one and a third one and ultimately sold them. But I've always had athletics in my background. And while I used to be a player and on the field, it was a pretty simple transition into business where I could take leadership positions and really be the coach. So at about 1991, I graduated I got out of Cal in 1981. Okay. And in 1991 is when I first got into real estate, and it was commercial real estate, where I joined a tenant rep firm. And we were chasing the largest accounts really in the United States and to represent them everywhere.
Yes.
And one of the principals that hired me took me to lunch one day in my first couple of weeks, and he said, you look around the office and you see these men and women dressed in these beautiful suits, and they've got shiny pens and they've got expensive cars downstairs. But what you really need to discipline yourself with is when you get a deal closed, you need to take a certain portion of that money and invest it in real estate. And I thought to myself, wow, that's incredible advice, right? And you don't forget stuff like that. And so what we did was, I was in commercial real estate in tenant rep leasing. Is when in 1993, when Tracy got pregnant, we had to move out of the condo that I owned as a bachelor. It's like, we need a home now. And so we went to this one neighborhood in Tiburon, California, and it was a tract neighborhood. All the homes were the same. And there was one on the market for $510,000, and there was one on the market for $365,000. Now this is 30 years ago, 40 years ago, and of course we bought the one for $510,000 because you could move in and go to the movies and have a baby, right?
Yeah.
And it drove me nuts that the house down the street was $170,000 or $145,000 cheaper. Yeah. So literally, I grabbed one of my, and this is about investing in real estate. I grabbed one of my buddies that had some money, and I took my Visa card to the bank and I maxed it out. We bought the house down the street.
What?
Fixed it up and flipped it. And over the next 10 years, we did 25 of those. And so that's how I ended up transitioning from commercial real estate to residential real estate, because ultimately my wife and I started a firm, and we started to grow it. Then we bought Pacific Union, and then Compass bought Pacific Union. So it's like that's the journey.
That's the quick journey. I got to rewind because you said some things that small world things. Did you go to San Rafael High or San Marin
No,
High?
I went to a private school, which now is known as the Branson School, but
Okay.
then it was known as the Mount Tamalpais School. It was a very small school in a little town by the name of Ross, California.
Okay.
Uh,
Just
there
because my
were,
brother and my nephews, they go to San Rafael High. And it sounded
it's
pretty good. It's in Marin. It's close.
it's 12 minutes away from where I went to high school.
Close. And
Yeah.
then tenant rep. That's interesting too, because that's my father-in-law has been in tenant reps for 50 years. Travers Realty. What firm were you with when you were a tenant rep?
I was originally with Colliers in San
Okay.
Francisco, and then did about an 18-month stint at what was Jones Lang Wooten, and we merged with LaSalle to become Jones Lang LaSalle. And then I was recruited away from there to be the first executive hired at a firm called LoopNet, which is still around.
LoopNet.
Super, yeah. And so we built LoopNet from the ground up,
Yeah. It's like the
starting in
MLS
MLS for
for
property
commercial.
scale. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let me drill in on the transition to residential. Sounds like you got in on the investing side. You entrepreneurial, started flipping homes, flipping homes. At some point you said did you buy a brokerage, start a brokerage? How did you actually get into residential brokerage? What was the first brokerage? Was it
Yes.
you and your Tracy, your ex-wife, or
This is my former wife. Yeah. And so through the process of doing these 25 homes in 10 years, Tracy got enamored with the real estate business. It became sort of a narcotic almost to her. She just
you
loved
loved it?
going, finding them, the vision, the improvements, the selling them. And so friends of hers and friends of ours said, "Hey, will you help us find a house?" And so she started doing brokerage, joined Coldwell,
Organic.
and yeah, joined Coldwell Banker, became sort of the number one agent in all of Marin County. And the brand was starting to hold her back in the high end. And so we
Yes.
started in 2006, we started our own business in Marin County. The name of the business is Morgan Lane Marin. And our vision was to just have 28 of the best real estate professionals in Marin County. And we did.
Okay.
And so that's how it all got started.
That's how it started. It was a little
Yeah.
boutique. You started. Tracy was all in. She loved it. You built it from there. Then how did you get to Pacific Union? And what's the Pacific Union story?
Yeah, so in August or September of 2008, when the Lehman Brothers crashed and
Yes.
the subprime crisis and the great financial crisis came along, the top line of our business and our brokerage business went off 60%, like in 1 month, and stayed there for probably 4, 5, 6 months.
Yeah.
The business wasn't massive, so it was something that we could handle. But in the process, I learned that GMAC, which was the largest subprime lender in the United States, was selling off its real estate operations, one of which was Pacific Union. And
Okay.
at the time, Pacific Union had 17 offices in the San Francisco Bay Area, about 440 people, and doing about $2 billion in sales volume, but they were losing money, and GMAC needed to downsize.
Got it.
Long story short, we did all our due diligence, we put in an offer, and in August of 2009, we closed. We bought it.
The bottom of the real estate market. The world's
Absolutely.
blowing up around you, and you went and bought a brand, Pacific Union, and you said they had 400 agents focused in NorCal and Marin.
Northern California, 17 offices, 440 people, a couple billion in sales volume, which was 2,000 transactions. So our average trade was just shy of $1 million, but it was losing $3.7 million a year.
So it's in the red. Now,
Um,
are you allowed to say what that transaction was? What amount? Is that public information? Or is that not something you could share?
Not really public, but let's just say it was less than the average price of a single family home in the north end of Marin County.
Yeah.
So
and is that type of transaction, at this point, you were pretty young in your career. It sounds like you may have had a young family. Was that the sort of thing where you had to go find investors to help you buy it, or you just went all in and said, we're leveraging everything we own and buying it?
well, it's check D, all of the above.
All of the above.
Yeah.
So that was a very stressful, risky, ballsy move.
Yeah. It was probably every other day leading up to the acquisition. I thought, hey, this is a great idea, or hey, this is just a crazy, insane idea.
You were back and forth on it as you were analyzing. Yeah.
And I had a very fortunate meeting about 90 days before closing, where the chairman of the board of Fidelity National Financial, Fidelity Title.
Yeah, biggest title.
Yeah. Somebody arranged for me to get an audience with him. His name's Bill Foley. And
Yes.
I spent a couple hours with him. He was enamored with the idea, and ultimately became my partner.
Oh, amazing.
Fidelity National Financial became my partner. We did about 10 years together. It was absolutely fantastic. They're incredible people. Obviously, they know the real estate space, but
so they came in and helped with the acquisition. They partnered on it, and then they became your title.
Yeah.
Title
I mean, other than the intellectual capital that I was able to gain from them, what they did was they gave me a line of credit. They made a small investment, but they gave me a line of credit to manage through that operating losses.
Yeah.
And that was instrumental in my ability to pull off the transaction and to operate the business.
Yeah.
And so we kept it a secret for almost 5 years. They didn't want anybody.
Oh, really?
No, they didn't want anybody to know, because they wouldn't want the other brokerage firms not to use them because
competitors. That would feel.
Yeah. So we kept it a secret for about 5 years, and then obviously as we kept growing, it became more public.
Okay, I'm putting you in a time machine. We're going back to 2009, and I'll say 2010, 9-10. You now are the principal owner of a brokerage. It's the bottom of the worst residential real estate market since the Great Depression. I mean, it was horrible. Banks are going out of business. Everyone's going out of business. You're a young guy, it sounds like, at that time, started family, this and that. What did it feel like that first 6 months, that first year? What was going on? What is the reality of that kind of pressure, stress? It couldn't have been a chill, we're printing money situation.
No, there was nothing chill about it. It was very intense, and it required very significant focus. Keeping the main thing every single day, and not becoming distracted. And it was it was just so very clear what had to be done. We had to downsize offices. We had to downsize the team. We had to get to the place where we could be profitable. And at about the same time, I would say in the first half of 2010, the wind at our back picked up a little bit.
Really?
So the market started to pick up a little bit.
That's when it first started to a little bit.
Yeah. And then also because of the size of Pacific Union, we were able to put together a joint venture with Wells Fargo to be in the mortgage business. And if you think back to then, the only lenders were portfolio banks.
Big.
And so we had Wells Fargo as a joint venture partner in the mortgage business, and the Bay Area being a jumbo market, they excelled at jumbo. And I learned a lot from Wells Fargo as well, about the mortgage business and about the joint venture. And it was so very lucrative so early that it really also helped to finance the growth of Pacific Union.
So they started generating revenue through that mortgage. So that was huge.
Very huge. And I'll never forget the advice that Arlene Art gave me when we were interviewing different banks. And she said to me, if you treat us, Wells Fargo, as a vendor, we will fail together. If you treat Wells Fargo as your partner, we will have incredible success together. And what that translated to, when people say stuff like that, you listen, right? And
it sticks with you.
Yeah. And what that meant was, if Danny's family had applied for a loan and we had to turn the application down, we would never say Wells Fargo turned it down. We would say the name of our company was Mortgage Services Professionals. We would say MSP turned this down, because you don't qualify. And that created this partnership that we were in this together. And it was really fantastic, because we ultimately grew Pacific Union in Northern California from 17 offices and 440 people to 28 offices and about 800 people, and doing about 7.5 or 8 billion in sales volume just in Northern California.
And in that cycle, you trimmed first. You had to cut offices, cut staff, make really tough decisions about human beings that you obviously their livelihood. Those are horribly tough decisions that business leaders have to make every day if they want to survive. So
yeah, but as hard as they are, the alternative was worse.
You're out. Yeah, you're all out of business.
You're done, right? Yeah. You're done, and that's not that elegant of an outcome.
Right. That's not an option. So you go through the pain. sounds like by 2010, at some point, you felt maybe some green shoots, a little bit of light. When did you feel like, oh, it's turned into our favor? We're now able to step on the gas and start building a business and profiting. How long did that take? Was it immediate? Was it years down the line? I mean, 2010 was still a tough market.
Specifically, it was June of
Okay.
2012. And I'll share with you why. Is that about 10 or 12 days after we bought Pacific Union, I got a phone call from a guy named Ron Peltier. And
Oh,
he
yes. Yes,
the
yeah.
chairman of the board of Home
Berkshire.
Services,
Yeah,
Berkshire Hathaway.
Berkshire Hathaway.
And apparently they were in second place trying to buy Pacific Union. Why the hell they sold it to me, I'll never know.
Your good looks. That's it.
Yeah. But he said in another conversation about something that someone says to you, he said, these businesses don't make any sense until you get 4,000 units a year. And, just like to put money in real estate, just like treat me like a partner, it's one of those statements that you just remember, right? And in June of 2012, I looked at the P&L at the end of the month, and we had closed 363 units, and we made like $500,000 that month.
Yeah.
And I multiplied 363 by 12, and what do you get? You get
you annualized it. He was right on the bot. He knows what he's talking about.
Absolutely bang. And so, that was like, wow, somebody told me this 2 years ago, and here it is. So that's when it really became, okay, now we can really start some more aggressive growth.
Yeah. So by and that makes sense even as an agent. That's when I remember feeling 2010 felt like, oh my God, maybe this will end eventually. 2011 started feeling like, oh, there's some positive, but 12 felt like we're in a good market again. And everything was like a different world from 2 years prior. And it sounds like you sort of mimicked the same thing on the brokerage side. So talk to me now. Sorry to get so into the weeds on that, but talk to me about brokerage and owning a brokerage. And you mentioned Wells Fargo and mortgage being a huge profit center, maybe, a life raft getting through that recession. What are the profit centers with brokerages these days? Because obviously, 30, 40 years ago, it was a 50-50 split with the house, and, they gave you a ton of services with assistants and marketing plans. And through that, the last half century, it became the opposite. We'll give you a higher split up to 90, 95, some places 100, but we're not going to give you any services. You're here. So now in 2024, what does a brokerage business look like, and what are the profit centers?
Yeah. Well, the successful brokerages now have some sort of scale, and scale can come on a regional basis. It can come on a national basis, and it also comes with diversity in income streams. So the only reason to go into the mortgage, title, escrow, home insurance business is not money. It's first how you can impact the elegance of the transaction for the consumer. And I'll give you an example of that. Like when we had our joint venture with Wells Fargo, if we had 100 loans in processing all the time, and the Danny Brown's family wanted to accelerate their closing, I could call the president of our joint venture and say, I want to take Danny's file from position number 17 to position number 3 and get it closed, in the next 2 days. Okay. Well, I couldn't do that with the greater Wells Fargo if I didn't have a relationship with them.
Sure.
So I just helped the experience of the Brown family going through that closing.
Yeah.
If you can do the same thing with title, and the same thing with escrow, and the same thing with property insurance, it's a more favorable experience for the consumer, and we get our greater share of wallet.
Yeah. Is mortgage still a big profit center, or are you really saying it's more about the elegance and being able to do special relationship favors for people?
Yeah, in today's, like today at Compass, we have a joint venture with Guaranteed Rate. The name of our mortgage company, as you well know, is Origin Point. And it's a very favorable business. And it's a very favorable business in the lowest units sold market since 1995. So, interest rates have been up. So it's been tough, but my view towards the future is Origin Point's going to be very, 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 very successful for Compass.
Yeah. All right. I guess I jumped ahead. I do want to jump back to your evolution from Pacific Union to uh, Compass.
Mm-hmm.
And from what I remember, and you'll correct me, Pacific Union was booming, expanding through as the market improved. You were growing, profitable, and I believe you rolled up at least locally Gibson and Partners Trust. I think you did a few throughout the state. But kind of talk to me through what at that point was your mind on let me scale so that I can exit, or were there just opportunities with other brokerages that you're like, oh, this makes sense to try to go back to the time machine to
Yeah.
2000 and I don't know what 13, 14, 15, 16, what
Yeah.
you were thinking as you were
Mhm.
acquiring brokerages at Pacific Union.
Yeah. So it was 2015 where we just sort of initiated, let's grow to Southern California. And
Okay.
Southern California and Northern California are very logical trading partners,
Yeah.
right? And if you go back to the advice of 4,000 units, there's no way that we could come to Southern California and try to grow organically,
Got it.
right? So I said, okay, I need to go down to Southern California and buy a firm or a series of firms to get me to that 4,000
Got it.
units, right?
So that
So
was your strategy.
yeah, so I spent most of late 2015, early 2016 in Southern California talking to brokerage firms, talking to escrow companies, and everything like that. And ultimately, in about a 9-month period, and Fidelity was incredibly supportive of the strategy because of their operations
Yeah.
in Southern California. Um, so in the back end of 2016 and early 2017, we did buy 3 brokerage businesses and we bought 3 escrow companies as well. Gibson International was first, John Arrow was second, and Partners Trust was third.
Oh, that's right. John Arrow as well.
Yeah. And ultimately, and so that got us to over the 4,000 units.
Yes.
And it got us to around 650 or 700 real estate professionals. So
Okay.
the business in San Francisco Bay Area was more mature and a little bit larger, but the Southern California business, bringing them together, had really fantastic promise. Ultimately, we merged the 3 escrow companies together to create one brand of Chartwell Escrow,
Yeah.
and we merged the 3 brokerage businesses together to create one brand of Pacific Union, and that all came together on January 1st of 2018.
That was 18 when that happened.
That's
Okay.
18.
Wasn't
Yeah.
that long ago.
Yeah, and then somebody set me up with a meeting in Newport Beach in the first couple of weeks of April of 2018 with Robert. And if you remember back in 2016, 17, Compass had a strategy of 20-20-20.
Yes. Yes.
20% market share, 20 markets by 2020.
Yes.
And we had about 18% market share in California.
Yeah.
So literally by definition, if Compass was going to achieve their goal, they're coming through my front door, right?
Yeah.
And literally for Compass, they could get to 2020 in California in one transaction.
Right.
So
It's a match made in heaven.
it was
so
a
to
great,
speak.
it was a great solve. It really
Yeah.
was a great solve. So that deal closed in September of 2018. So I got together with Robert in April and we buttoned it up
Relatively quick.
relatively quickly. Mm-hmm.
So, what are the challenges rolling up brokerages under a different brand name? I mean, as an agent, I got to think, well, do I want to stay there? Attrition, do I want to stay? I met Scott Gibson. Scott Gibson is an iconic leader, or John Arrow, or any of the Partners Trust. These guys are leaders and icons, and people follow them from brokers to brokers. Now they're getting rolled up into Pacific Union. So what are the challenges? Is that the challenge? How do you keep people around? Like, how does that? What were the pain points for you during those times?
Yeah, the toughest pain point is number one, we're in the people business, right? The people happen to transact real estate, but without the people, if I don't get the people right, nothing else matters, right?
Sure.
And there's some of the same things that I'm about to describe to you, Pacific Union experienced when Compass acquired us. But when we acquired the 3 businesses, up until the day that all 3 of them were together, they were competitors.
Yeah.
They were hustling in the streets. Me versus you. Yeah. And so the transition of that competitive nature to a cooperative, together we're going to do this nature, it just takes time. It probably took 100 maybe 120 days for people to all to get on the same page. And there were people both in leadership and real estate professionals who said, you know what, this is not my choice. And that's okay. It's okay. Pursue interests elsewhere. But the branding went over, I think, fairly well on the 1st of January of 2018. And culturally, we were operating as one.
Yeah.
So that was, that took almost a year.
So just getting into the weeds, what is a typical, when you acquire a brokerage, is there a typical attrition rate where when you acquire, like, well, this is the industry average, we're going to lose 10, 20%. Is there a number like that, or is it just different at every acquisition and every merger?
Yeah, the average is probably in the 15 to 20%.
Okay.
We never experienced that. When Compass acquired us, we experienced 9%. And so
Very
that was,
low.
very low. And interesting, it was 9% of the people and also 9% of the sales volume. And so by definition, it was sort of the average person as opposed to the top or the bottom. You have to expect that. I don't think that's,
not everyone's going to want to stay, and they have
right.
the right to go. Well, when I think about specifically your acquisitions of, John Arrow, Scott Gibson, Nick Siegel, and the rest of the partners. I mean, these were major players. Jesus, Scott Gibson ran Coldwell Banker, and John Arrow has already done it multiple times at the highest level.
Right.
These are legendary, once in a lifetime type moguls in the business. Was their experience in having been there, done that, helpful? Like, they were like, was that part of it, that they've been through this and they were able to, hey, look, talk to their people and say, look, this is a great situation for all of us? And is that why part of it, or was it something you did? Is it a combination?
Yeah, I mean, they were Scott, John, Nick, Smith and Berg. They were not foreigners to starting firms, acquiring firms.
Right.
They were not foreigners to it at all.
No,
the tricky
all
part,
done it.
Yeah, the tricky part was to get them to all do it together.
Right.
And that was kind of my role, as I spent a lot of time in Southern California. And I have just found that the best way to get people to work together is to empower them. Empower them. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, well, let me put it this way. People love to follow vision, right? And our vision was to be the best in Southern California, mainly LA County, then go to Orange County, then go to San Diego. And
have the whole state.
People want to follow vision. And so together we formed our vision, because nobody wakes up in the morning and says, you know what I'd really like to have happen today is I just really like someone to manage me. Like, nobody wakes up that way. They want to be able to go out and run hard and put results on the scoreboard and be rewarded for it.
Right. They don't want to be micromanaged and told what to do, especially dynamic, intelligent, successful leaders. So
they know what to do.
When the roll up of those three Southern California LA brands happened, was Compass on the radar as, hey, we're going to do this and then we're going to go to Compass, or that just happened a year or two later?
I might get these dates wrong, but I think Compass came to Los Angeles in 2015 and San Francisco in 2016. So Compass was definitely around, no question.
They were around, but was your thought, once I expand through California, then that just happened after you met Robert and it started making sense?
Yeah, I mean, our vision was broader. I was spending time in Portland. I was spending time in Seattle.
Northwest expansion.
Had not yet gone to Phoenix or Denver, but we were exploring, could we become a West Coast regional firm?
Got it. All right, so now we're going to hop over to the transaction to Compass. I've asked the question already, but similar challenges. Now you have, I don't know how many agents you had at that point and all those brokerages put together, but now you're coming into the Compass fold. What were some of the challenges, and what were some of the pros and cons? And obviously there's a lot of positives and probably a lot of challenges as well.
Yeah, so I was on the other side of the trade this time, right? I was the firm, I represented the firm that was being acquired as opposed to the acquiring firm.
Yes.
So I was pretty familiar with what it would take. I got sort of my top 10 leaders involved early. we jumped on planes and went to New York to meet with Compass to really find out what's going on, because I'm a big believer in teamwork. Like if I wanted to do this trade and the team didn't, it wouldn't be successful, right? It wouldn't be successful at all. So I had to get them bought into the process and meet the leadership team at Compass and everything like that. We were clipping along pretty well for a closing, and 3 weeks before the closing, the news broke through Inman that this trade was going to happen, and that was just crazy town. It's like everything went crazy. But if I didn't have those 10 people involved and have already been to New York and believing in the dream, it would have been me trying to convince 2,300 people that this is a good thing to do instead of the 11 of us.
Yes.
So that gave us leverage to manage through that news break, but it was not fun.
Yeah, well, that's a very smart business lesson right there, to have your leadership involved, not just the one person, because everyone's got to buy in to make it work, and everyone's got to buy in once you do it to get everyone else to buy in. So rather than just being on a silo and saying, hey, this is what I'm doing, I'm the leader of this company, and I'm not going to, that's a really interesting, smart way to go about it.
Leadership or management in the real estate brokerage business is leadership without authority. Like you really don't have the ability to tell anybody what to do every day.
Yes.
And nor does anybody. It goes back to the same thing. Nobody wants to wake up and be managed. Like they want to be empowered. They want to be motivated. They want to follow a vision. And so that's the best way to affect change in the real estate business.
Yeah. Any crazy stories through all this madness of buying and selling? You must have met some interesting characters throughout the years. But if there's any real estate stories that stand out, I'd love to hear some funny stuff.
Yeah, one that I've told before. In one of the times that I was coming to Southern California to visit with a variety of firms, I set it up. Hey, I'm going to be there all day Wednesday or whatever it might be, right? And why don't you pick a place and we'll have breakfast, lunch, or a cocktail or dinner or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I was meeting with 4 firms that day. All 4 of them picked the exact same restaurant. So, and it was the casual restaurant at the Montage, right up the street from the office there.
Oh my God, that's where it was.
Yeah. And so I think I stayed at the Montage the night before, and I had to go into the restaurant at 7:15. And I had to say, hey, you just got to know something. I'm going to be here all day.
All day.
I'm going to be here for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And you can't say, do you want your same table? You can't say, are you going to have the same, cappuccino? You have to pretend like it's my first visit, because I don't want folks to know.
They had to be in on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You didn't want everyone to know you're sitting there lining up meetings.
Right. Yeah. So it was actually very funny.
That is very funny. And
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about Compass. Compass, very different type of company. Now it's known and it's as big as it gets nationally. Wasn't always the case, but talk to me. It's been a tough couple of years. We're still in the middle of this. What do you see the future of brokerage, the future of Compass over the next year or two? If you have your crystal ball, what does your crystal ball say?
Well, so I left Compass in, I think it was May of 21, a couple of years after the acquisition, maybe 2.5 years after the acquisition. It was time for me to go, because if you're going to integrate the business, having the former leader there is probably, well, what does Mark want to do? No, it's not what Mark wants to do. It's what Compass wants to do.
Yeah.
So it was time for me to go. But I kept a really close relationship with Robert. And then, I decided to come back in July of 23, right? Yeah, in July of 23. Yeah, and the business that I left was very different than the business I came back to. And the difference was the business I came back to had an insatiable knowledge for real estate. How does real estate work? As opposed to, we're a tech company empowering real estate professionals. No, we're actually in this business. And the transformation that Compass went through, maybe beginning a year earlier from July of 22, when the markets really shifted in March of 2022 to the downside.
Yeah.
And so real estate has been in a recession for the last sort of 2.5 years.
I agree. I feel it.
You feel it. Yeah, you feel it. And what the leadership team at Compass accomplished from like July of 22 until about the time that I came back is truly remarkable. The way that the business was downsized
Yeah.
to get the expenses to fit inside the gross margin line. It was,
They cut back a lot.
it's truly remarkable. Someday it'll be a Harvard Business School case study or something like that. And so I just have a great admiration for the team going through that. And then since I've been back, we've all at the leadership level and all through the field and local levels, we've all worked very, very hard together to make sure we're supporting the real estate professionals as they deserve in a really rough market with rough changes. I mean, the way that the organization prepared for the NAR changes that went into effect August 17th, our people across the country were trained and empowered, I would say probably better than any other brokerage in the country. And
they started pushing information out a long time ago.
Yeah, it's like the coaching team, the leadership, everybody got involved. The brokers of record, everybody got involved, and we got this. We got this. Change happens all the time. It's how you prepare for change that makes the difference.
Yeah. And how do you see Compass moving forward through this? We're still in 2024, elections happening, interest rates are starting to turn a little bit. There's all those micro factors, but getting into 25 and 26 and getting through that, where do you see Compass at that time?
Well, I think all the things you just mentioned, the elections and this and that, it's all noise, right? And we have to manage through the noise. Our clients manage through noise all the time. We help them manage through noise, right? And then our industry does us all a favor. We publish news on noise, and
headlines that don't make any sense with reality.
So if history repeats itself, which generally it does, the last time we saw a trough in units of 4 million units of houses sold in the United States. The last time was the Great Recession. The time before that was 1995.
Yeah.
And after both of those troughs, the markets were on about a 7 to 10 year run back up in over 6 million homes. So I am very hopeful that we are in that same position. And with the Fed's position to do what they say they're going to do, is to sort of much more modest interest rates, that will fuel the housing market. And I think we could be in for, a 5 to 7 year run that would be very, very positive. And I'm sure
I hope so.
all of your listeners are dancing in the street. That's one.
Well, look, we've been talking about bad news and downside. I remember Scott Gibson and I interviewed him 2 years ago, and he was saying survive until 25. And this might have been 22 by then. 25, but here we are. And it's at least 25 because 25 is almost here. Yet, I'm feeling in the trenches fundamental changes with the interest rates and people getting used to, in LA, at least the ULA mansion tax. And we'll see. We'll see what happens in the next 6 to 12 months. I think that's going to say a lot. But I think I'm cautiously optimistic as well. And historically, over 100 years, and when there's these recessions in real estate, they're followed by really big, strong, robust up cycles, and they're not making more land in California, coastal California either. And
that's right.
People may be moving to Texas or Florida, but they're still moving to California too. So anyway, I think fundamentally it's going to be interesting to see the positive run and how this unfolds for our industry and specifically even for Compass, because Compass I think is really well positioned for the market turnaround, and that's when we're really going to know, how did Compass do? We'll know 2, 3, 4 years down the line if the market turns around.
If Scott predicted stay alive till 25 2 years ago, I hope he bought a lottery ticket the same day.
It'll be great in 28.
Exactly.
Any other words of wisdom you want to share? Any other advice for agents and managers? And you've obviously seen a lot, done a lot, have a tremendous amount of success, but certainly been in the trenches, got your hands dirty, and have seen the business from a 30,000 foot level, and the ups and the downs and all arounds.
Yeah, I think the most important thing for managers to keep in mind and real estate professionals to keep in mind is the manager's relationship with the real estate professionals and the real estate professionals' relationship with their clients is based on one fundamental, and that's trust. And
Trust.
it's the most important thing in a relationship, either from the manager to the real estate professional or to the client. And trust is like a loyalty card that your client gives you. And only the client can take it away. And it's just just don't underestimate how much your clients trust you for advice, recommendation, knowledge to manage through the noise that they're experiencing.
Fantastic. I love it. I think that's huge. I think that's our whole business is trust, and life relationships are built on trust. Well, then you got to get back to work. So I'm going to let you go, but it was great to hang and chat. Hopefully I'll see you soon, either LA or somewhere else, but it's been awesome and looking forward to catching up again soon.
Danny, thanks for having me on today.
Great, Mark. Good to see you.
Okay. Take care.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode. If you like what you heard and you love real estate as much as we do, please go to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review and a comment. That would help our ratings so much. If you want to hear more episodes, you can go to The Deal with Danny Brown on YouTube or Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Amazon, or anywhere else you consume your podcasts.